morning, everybody. It's David Blackmon here at Energy Impacts. Welcome to the show. With me also today is Turley from Energy Newsbeat and our two special guests today, old friends, IPAA, the Independent Association of America, Independent Producers Association, Petroleum Association of America. I'm sorry. I've only had a 30-year relationship with this organization. I still can't get the name right. Good grief. Dan Naatz, Chief Operating Officer. How are you today?
Doing well, David. It's good to see you again, my friend. It's always a pleasure to join you and talk about these issues.
Well, thank you for being here. And Mallori Miller, the VP of Government Relations at IPAA, is happy to see you again, too. The last time I talked with you guys was at the 2024 NAPE conference, and it's really good to see y'all again.
That's right. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate your time. We will keep this tight today because I know y'all are incredibly busy getting ready for Congress to come back to town. Oh, my goodness. But before we get into questions and answers, just take a minute to talk about IPAA and who your members are and the wonderful services this organization has provided to the oil and gas industry for, what, a century now?
Yeah, almost. We're in our 97th year. So
Wow.
We've been going quite a while now. We are a federal lobbying organization. We represent members from all over the country that operate in 34 states as well as the offshore. They're independent oil and gas companies, so non-integrated companies. We don't have majors that represent pipeline industry or refining. So we're strictly focused on upstream oil and gas development. We represent some of the smaller companies. We say on average, our average member company has about 20 employees. So really it is the small businesses of America. And we love that we get to represent them and tell their story to Congress. We operate just at a federal level. So we work in partnership with our fellow state trade associations. We don't weigh into state politics or state issues, and we rely on our state trades to do that, but work in partnership with those state trades as well. We've got about 4,000 members around the country and are headquartered in Washington, D.C.
4,000 members. Think about that. Even after all the consolidation in the industry, 4,000 independent producers, members of this one organization. And it says so much about the nature of the U.S. industry as compared to other countries, where in many other countries you have a national oil company or maybe a few handful of companies that are, affiliated with the government. But here in America, our industry is made up of thousands of different companies, sole proprietors, as well as the big, people, always think of oil and gas as ExxonMobil and Chevron and the majors. But really, it's these mom and pop operations that have always made this industry go. And these are the real risk takers in the industry because they're not risking money of shareholders and corporate investors and banks. They're risking their own personal fortunes to provide energy to the country. And it's, it's the story of the industry since its inception in 1859. So I don't know of another organization that better exemplifies what this industry really is than IPAA. It's always a pleasure to talk to you folks. There is a ton going on in Washington. Thankfully, Congress did take its month-long August recess, but comes back next Tuesday, day after Labor Day. And, let's start by just talking about this has been it's just been an incredibly busy world in the realm of energy, a sea change in energy policy once again, even more significant, I think, than President Trump and his team brought around during the first presidency. This is a much more organized and effective administration, I believe, and is really focused on major change to all sorts of federal policy, but energy specifically. Just as a general thing, we have low oil prices, gas prices have been low for 15 years. How are IPAA's members feeling about what's happening in the industry and in Washington, D.C. this year? Yeah, just either one of y'all.
Yeah, David, I would, first of all, again, thank you for having us. It's been incredibly dynamic since since President Trump came in. With the passage of the one big, beautiful bill, the reconciliation bill, a lot of significant changes happened there. IPAA was engaged at virtually every level of that. And some of them are changing really bad policy from the Biden administration on federal lands, onshore and offshore, where we're going to have now leases that are going to be predictable. They'll know when those leases are. The companies can plan it. You talk about the independent producers. You and Mallori are talking about the smaller producers that we represent. Really important for them to have some predictability in this leasing process, in the permitting process, and we can talk some more about that. In addition, the OBBA repealed the methane tax for 10 years. We tried very hard to get it taken out altogether. There were some scoring issues on that, but again, important for our members, important for the country to have that done. And there's tax provisions, a lot of other provisions that were in there, which are really important. I would also say, I think it's certainly a breath of fresh air from the previous administration about understanding the importance of American oil and natural gas to the world's economy, and certainly to the American economy, but to the stability of the world. And as we talk about the kind of horizons that are out there, and we can do that some more of talking about data centers, talking about AI, the massive amount of energy that this nation and the world's going to need. And the American industry just continues to be that shining light, American oil and natural gas industry, of providing those resources in a very serious way. So we commend the Trump administration. They're working very hard. Somebody was saying, which is true, Trump 2.0 is really like they've really put the pedal to the metal as compared to the last administration, because they know what they're doing. They're moving, and we're going to continue to work with them to help our members continue to supply that American oil and natural gas.
Hey, I want to follow up on one point you made, because it really helps illustrate, I think, to our audience how important IPAA and other trade associations really are. The fact that the methane tax, which would have raised energy costs for everybody in America, dumbest provision in the IRA, and that's saying a lot, was only suspended for 10 years. It wasn't repealed. It was suspended for just 10 years. And, it's going to require institutional memory about that, to look for the right, more favorable political situation where you might be able to get language put into a bill that will make that cut permanent. And it's such a big part of the value that IPAA and folks like Mallori and Dan bring to the prospects of this industry and the health of this industry, that they're going to have that institutional memory there. Whereas otherwise, 10 years is a long time, and it might just get forgotten if it wasn't for the work these folks are doing on behalf of the industry. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Mallori, did you want to follow up on Dan's answer?
Yeah, well, in terms of what you just mentioned about the methane tax, we have not taken our foot off the pedal. We are that's still our number one issue. The problem with the vehicle that they used to get the 10-year delay, it's a complicated thing in Congress, and there had to be a different monetary hook. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get a full repeal at this time, but it's still our number one issue, and something that we're working on a lot. I did just want to say, Dan mentioned this administration has hit the ground running, and they're getting things done a lot quicker than they did the first time around. We're very pleased to see the different secretaries that are now in place: Doug Burgum over at DOI, Chris Wright at Energy, and Lee Zeldin at EPA. Having those guys in place is vital for our industry. They all understand the industry, and they're making real changes.
Yeah.
We are still waiting to get some of the second tier people in place. And a lot of that's held up with the Senate right now. There's a lot of infighting between the Senate Republicans and Democrats. Democrats aren't letting nominees go easily. Usually it's a process where the president picks his nominee and then, you might have a little back and forth. But most of the time, the party that's not in power will let the president have their picks. That's not happening right now. So, we're still waiting on a BLM director. We're still waiting on Leslie Beyer to get through the Senate, a number of other people in these kind of second tier agency director roles. So we're trying to move the ball along there as well.
Well, is it the same blue card process? Is that what's holding them up? That's what's holding up the judges. At least that's my understanding. Is it that same process?
Similar. Yeah, it's
Similar.
a little different than the blue slip, but what they are
Blue
requiring
slips.
is every nominee they're putting requiring a cloture vote.
Yeah.
And so that's the issue. And I don't know, Mallori outlined it very well. There, again, we focus on energy. We focus on Department of Interior, Department of Energy, FERC, but there are the Defense Department, State Department, Department of Agriculture. All of these guys are held up. And so I think you're going to see from what our discussions with Senate leadership, Republican leadership, some efforts to try to move that along. And what Senator Thune does, Majority Leader Thune does, I'm not sure. But there is quite a bit of frustration that the Democrats are blocking this, and we'll see what happens.
You mentioned go ahead, Stu.
Recess appointments can happen, but it seems like the Republican majority in the Senate stood there and had a staffer read things to keep it still in session. So was I mistaken by watching this play out that it could have actually been recess appointments for some of the underlings just to get things moving?
So, Stu, I'll tell you, I've been around Washington a long time and worked in the Senate for a long time. There was the ability to do some recess appointments, but you always need to be careful about that. And because what will happen is eventually the administration is going to change. You're going to have somebody else in, and as my mother always used to say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Once you go down that road, you run into some really complicated situations. And recess appointments, I'm not an expert on it, but really what they tend to end up being temporary anyways. And really what they need is to just get serious about this, get the folks in. Mallori was talking about BLM director, some people who can make decisions, who can go to these state offices and say, let's get this done. And then we'll see from there. So we'll see. It could be, though, that Senator Thune has had enough and they may change that. But every time you do that, it kind of further whittles away this give and take.
The only reason I ask that is because we're on a limited time run. When you have our great secretary, and I call them the three horsemen of the energy dominance apocalypse. When you have Chris Wright, you have Lee Zeldin, and you have Doug Burgum. I mean, those guys are rock stars. But we're in a limited window for being able to get energy, low-cost energy, because natural gas is so critical for the AI rush and the natural gas and stabilization of the grid and all this kind of stuff. Even those short-term appointments could help before the midterm, because we're going to have rising electricity costs coming up. That was the underlying reason for my question.
Yeah, Senator Thune has typically been a pretty by the book guy. He likes regular order. But as Dan mentioned, he's getting pushed hard. And at some point, will he decide that regular order isn't working anymore? So we'll see.
I know you guys recently met with Emily Dominich on the permitting. She heads up the permitting council for the federal government. And I was fortunate to interview her last month. She's really a bundle of energy. She's kind of a force of nature, I think. I wonder what y'all talked about with her, just in terms of priorities y'all like to see happening with some of these permitting holdups. We all know they pretty much, not all of them, but most relate to, major environmental protection acts. And so it's a very complicated playing field that she's having to try to navigate. And just wonder what, if you'd like to share some of the priorities you talked with her about.
Yeah, Emily is great. She's a Hill veteran. She previously worked for Speaker McCarthy as his energy person, so she understands policy very well. She understands the industry very well. More than anything, we didn't really share with her a lot of our priorities, but more than anything, we wanted to kind of glean knowledge from her on what her role is in this new the Permitting Council, which was established in 2015 and made permanent in 2021. But I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, or people just don't even know what the Permitting Council is or what they do. They get their authority from Fast 41, but basically they take the deputy secretaries from 13 different agencies and coordinate some of these large scale projects moving through the system. So they set timelines that have to be reached, and there's a lot more transparency and accountability and that sort of thing. And she's kind of the director that is making sure all the trains are running through the station. One thing we're going to have her do a webinar for us in the next few weeks for our member companies to see if to give information on what she does, because again, I don't think it's very publicized out there. The one thing that I will say is for her, it's large scale projects. So there is a capital requirement for a project to be on the dashboard and qualify for this kind of moving through the system, if you will, a shepherding type of situation. And so a lot of our member companies are probably too small for that. But I do think it's a very interesting way that they are coordinating kind of all agencies at a federal level, and something that maybe we could look at to put into like a pilot project or something like that, so that our companies could qualify. We're starting to toss around ideas, of exactly how this coordination could work and that sort of thing.
David, I would just follow on from Mallori's answer. I think Emily Dominich is a great example of as you described it, the energy and the force of what this administration is bringing. She was explaining during the Biden administration, it basically was dormant. They didn't use it. They didn't have it. You have now people looking, qualified professionals who are really going at it. And Emily will be clear on that she's been directed to move this forward. And again, we can have a further discussion on permitting, but it is just so important, not only in the oil and gas space, but in the energy space overall. And are we going to build things? Are we going to have mines? Are we going to have rare earth mineral mines? Are we going to do these things? And so I think she is just a classic example of what the Trump administration has brought in. And Stu, to your point, the time is short. I mean, she will acknowledge we got to move. And that's what they're doing, but it's a complete sea change from the previous administration, and I think even a change from the first Trump administration. They were good, but they're really going after it now, and so we want to work with her team, work with anybody at the White House on these important issues.
You mentioned Lee Zeldin earlier, and I know you guys do work on, an array of EPA related issues, regulatory matters. His big push right now is constructing the justification for rescinding the endangerment finding on greenhouse gases, which I have my own opinions about. But I just wonder if you guys at IPAA, are y'all involved in that? Any advocacy on that specific part of what he's doing, or is that kind of outside of the association's?
So it's certainly an important part, as you put all this together, the endangerment finding, our leadership is still working. We haven't worked specifically on commenting on the endangerment finding, but I will tell you, David, we work with EPA on a daily basis. One of our colleagues, Lee Fuller, who you know well,
Yes.
has been talking about methane issues. We're trying to do reconsideration of the Quad OA, Quad OB, Quad OC rules, and that's about the extent of my knowledge, is to say that there's 4 zeros and a B and a C and an A. But Lee knows it well. But for small producers, it's really important because, again, what the administration tried to do is make a huge impact on marginal wells. And the Biden administration, said the Biden administration saying, well, marginal wells really don't matter. Well, as you know, and you talked about, if you look at just one marginal well, it may not matter, but cumulatively across the country, it's an important.
It's like
part
12% of
infrastructure
supply.
and key to what's going on. So we have been working very closely with the EPA, also working with our state trades. Mallori mentioned that we work with the state trades, and we're strictly federal, but working on that. And again, Administrator Zeldin has been fantastic. We knew him when he was in Congress, but really didn't work that closely with him. And he's just been great at getting that agency, which can cause so many delays and so much heartache for our smaller members to get moving. And so we're very pleased with that.
Go ahead.
This may be a bit of an off topic, and I have a real question because in Texas we work with we do deal evaluations at Sandstone, and we evaluate maybe 8 to 10 oil and gas deals a week. We go through these things, and we love working with the Texas Railroad Commission. We have a great relationship. How do you all work with the federal and the state? Because California is a real national security problem coming around the corner. And I'm sure you've got some IPAA members out in California that can't get a permit. So just didn't know if you have a state relationship in either one of those areas, because IPAA in California needs some help.
Well, it's as Mallori mentioned, Stu, we work very closely with state trades, and for example, the California Independent Petroleum Association, or one of the things I was even to go back, the real power of what Mallori and David were talking about is we have members in 34 states. There are independent producers in 34 states in this country. Some places where you'd be surprised. I mean, before I got the IPAA, I didn't know they made oil and gas, had oil and gas there. Certainly California is different. That's been a long tradition. But if you look at what California is facing, we work very closely with them, and you see what's happening. It's also interesting politically, and I'm not here to speak for Gavin Newsom or anybody, but I think the Democrats are in a situation where you just can't say no to everything. And I will stress, we don't do refineries, but he made some action on refineries, because you say we're going to take those away, and his constituents are not going to be very pleased about this. So I think, and we can talk some more about that, even in the permitting reform realm, there is a realization that we've got to do something in a bipartisan nature to build stuff, to have infrastructure, to address. I talked about these data centers. You're talking about just huge amounts of energy. And so in my opinion, kind of the Democratic mantra of just saying, no, we're going to lean on the National Environmental Policy Act to say no. We're going to lean on the Endangered Species Act to say no. Again, we've all been here. We understand how important those are. Our members are committed to protecting the environment, to protecting endangered species. But this has to be done in a way that will allow you to move forward, or at least work on, have it apply to specific projects. That's the other issue. Climate change then they want to have your project in the Powder River Basin of Wyoming. You have to say, how's it going to impact the climate in the world?
All right.
That's not going to work. And so I think they're bringing some common sense. And I know that's thrown around a lot, but common sense approach to that. And we are certainly working with our colleagues at the state trades to do that.
I know the speaker has talked about the potential for doing another reconciliation bill later this year, and maybe even one in 2026 before the midterms. I just wonder what y'all think about the prospects for that. Do you see things kind of lining up in that direction, that we may be able to have another bill that you wouldn't be subject to a filibuster?
Yeah, so they're definitely starting to toss around ideas. I met with Jason Smith's LD earlier this week, and Jason Smith obviously chairs the House Ways and Means Committee, which is the largest tax committee in Congress. So they're starting to have some of these discussions. I think if they get to the point where some of these things become actionable, it's definitely going to be a partisan bill. And then they also have they've got to kind of figure out the logistics of how they want to walk this through. Anything done in a reconciliation has to have a budget tag attached to it. So pulling back a lot of IRA provisions again. So exactly what they're going to be able to get out of this, I'm not sure. And how likely is it that they'll be able to get something over the finish line?
Yeah.
I anticipate that it'll be kind of more conservative than the one that was just passed. So, how many people are going to end up voting for that in the House? The Speaker has a very thin majority. So they're tossing it around. I think there's momentum to do it, but, we'll see what
Right.
happens. The devil's in the details.
Well, it's such a complex environment right now, and they get back, and of course, they've got to try to fund the government. Dan and I were talking before we started. We don't have a single budget bill. There's a dozen appropriations bills that need to be passed every year to have a real budget. So we're going to be doing another continuing resolution. I guess the next month is going to be just kind of all tied up in that, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You go ahead, Mallory. You got it. Nope.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to focus on, especially behind the scenes. Obviously, they have to put stuff on the floor. I think there also is a big push for permitting reform. So I think we'll see a lot of movement in that arena, just with different pieces of legislation, different committees holding hearings, that sort of thing. But funding the government is the most important priority that they have to do. So if they don't get that done, then everything else grinds to a halt. So
I got an email. I get a weekly email from Inveris, their daily rig count that they do. And I noticed an interesting dynamic that's been happening this year. We're seeing an uptick in natural gas focused active rigs and a downtick, more than corresponding downtick in rigs drilling for oil. And I wonder, is that something you guys are hearing from your members, that they're kind of trending to becoming more gas focused again?
David, I've been out in different parts of the country, even over August, and I think there is that the numbers you're looking at are real, and they reflect this what our members are looking at as far as natural gas and oil. Obviously, the price of oil is important, and it's always going to be. And we're not here to talk about prices, but the world market is so volatile. And Mallory will laugh because I sound like Johnny One Note, but the importance of natural gas to this data center and AI revolution that's going on is just huge. And I've talked to our members. The market is just, the numbers are phenomenal, things that I can't even believe. And to a point where you say, okay, look, we've got a lot of work to do. So I think, David, what you're seeing is a reflection that, and you're already seeing it in Pennsylvania and others, companies making firm deals with the tech companies. How as a nation we address this is really important again. And so I think that's what's going on.
Dan, you should tell your Denver anecdote. I think that's really an interesting one.
Yeah. So this is when the president was just up in Pittsburgh, and Secretary Burgum was there, and another, and they were talking about Meta is putting a data center in that is going to require 5 gigs of energy. And I will be the first to tell you, I'm not a utility guy. I don't know but Burgum, as I was watching him, anticipated that I'd say, well, what does that mean? Sometimes it gets so crazy. 5 gigs, the city of Denver uses 1 gig. And so you're talking about 5 cities of Denver, 1 data center requiring that amount of energy. And I thought it was pretty powerful because, you say, yeah, this is a huge amount of energy. And sometimes if you just say 5 gigs, like I said, I'm in the energy business and I don't really understand what that means. But when you put it in that context, you're talking about 5 cities of Denver at one data center. And then multiply that in Texas, multiply that in all over the place, how we're going to do that. So, David, that's a long answer to your question, but I do think there's a real focus on natural gas because it is going to be a key component in providing the supplies that we need.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons for that. That's becoming basically the framework, I think, around the country is you're going to see natural gas provide, most of the behind the meter power for these new data centers because it's the cheapest, it's the quickest you can develop, and it just, you can do it quickly. You don't have to wait 10, 15 years for technology to become ripe. And
David, I will also tell you that reflects Mallory's question is, I come back to the office like a school kid going, can you believe what's going on? And they're tired of me. Then the next day I'll come back and go, I cannot believe the amount of energy. So they're tired of hearing my shtick, but it's really important. The
5 gigs, I mean, at our Comanche Peak nuclear plant, we've got 2 reactors. Each one is 1.1 gigs, gigawatts of power. So that's 5 of those for a single data center, folks. I mean, it's just that people don't understand the immensity of the scale of the problem that we're facing here in the next decade. And natural gas simply has to be a major part of that because
100%.
These data centers have to run virtually 100% of the time. And you can't do it with wind and solar. You just can't.
Right.
We are out of time. And I want to respect your schedules. I know you're both incredibly busy. I know Stu's busy. Me, I'm going to go take a nap after this, but we all have things to do, right? I'm old, so I have an excuse. But hey, thank you guys so much. It's so great to see you guys. And we need to do this again soon.
Well, David and Stu, thank you so much again for the opportunity. And we're always, it's a pleasure for us to talk. And again, let us know. And we're always happy to participate.
Say hi to Lee Fuller for me too.
Will do.
Well, David, we are planning our DC trip. Yeah, we're planning a DC trip, so we'll give you a buzz.
Great.
Great.
Absolutely.
Please do. Any way we can be helpful, let us know, Stu.
Good deal. Thank you, folks, and thank you everybody for watching. And we'll see you again soon with another episode of Energy Impacts and Energy Newsbeat. Thank you.